Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the Hare Krishna Project podcast. This is episode number 119. A big thank you to everyone who continues to tune in on a regular basis. As you know, we're producing up to 3 podcasts a week, or however many I can squeeze in around all the stuff that I do. I'm very grateful to everyone from all over the world that tunes in now to listen to this podcast. Do not forget, if you're watching this on YouTube, to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Every time I say that, the number of subscribers does go up. Or if you're watching this on Facebook, please do not forget to like or follow the Hare Krishna Project Facebook page, because you can be kept updated that way or via YouTube about all of our productions here at the Hare Krishna Project. Okay, as you know, we discuss a wide range of issues here at the Hare Krishna Project, and we've developed this reputation for being a bit kind of, I don't know, straight edge, no hidden agenda. As you know, I'm a journalist, I work in public relations, and generally I don't shy away from topics that need to be discussed. This is also a bit of an historic episode, because our guest this week is only the second person ever to appear twice. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Bhaktivinode Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
It's great to have you with us. Now, Bhaktivinode, or Bhakti, as he's fondly known, was actually guest number 29 back in February 2022. And he's returned on the 119th episode. So I've made him wait 90 episodes. I've had to interview 90 other people before I came back to Bhakti. Back to Bhakti. That could be a little campaign, couldn't it? And it's great to have Bhakti back on the show. Many of you may remember or may have heard his story before. I've certainly known Bhakti, I reckon, in this life for at least 10 years. Possibly. Our paths have crossed a number of times, and it's always a delight. Always an experience, actually. I think it's the best way to put it. So Bhakti, just as kind of an introduction before we get on to the main topic of conversation today, let's just tell us a bit about you. How long have you been involved with the Hare Krishna movement, and how did you get involved?
Yeah, I'm involved in the Hare Krishna movement. What is it? 44 years now.
Wow.
I first went to Soho Street Temple, 1981. Yeah, a friend invited me along. I didn't actually want to go. He had to ask me a few times before I went. We were squatting in London and wandering the streets, and he was like, "Come on, we'll go to the Hare Krishna temple. They give you a big feast up there." I was like, "No, I'm not. They'll just look down on me if I'm just there for the food, you know." I was like, "I'm not going there." But he talked me into it, and I went, and it was quite a pleasant experience, to be honest. I didn't listen much to the lecture. I wish I would have, but the feast was very good, and it was served very nicely. And I actually thought, very nice, probably a bit too nice for me. I was brought up in, like, you know, pretty sort of rough, tough environment, you know, where you kind of didn't say anything unless, you know, you were going to make sense. It was that everybody was drunk at the weekends, and then nobody spoke to each other during the week, you know. It was, everybody was too either ashamed or embarrassed, or, like, you know, had nothing to say, you know, during the week, like in the family home. And if you did say something, you know, everybody turn around and look at you, and, like, if you got something to say for yourself, you know. It was like, it was a wee bit like that, you know. It was, I mean, there was love at home, and, you know, it's love that attracts me to, you know, a Hare Krishna movement. It's love has been the main aspect in my life, you know, because the rest has been a bit of a shambles, but the love has been there, and it's always made it worthwhile, and, you know, a laugh. And you know, it's got me through, you know.
Mm.
So yeah,
Well, 44 years, I mean, in one sense, it's not a long time in the grand scheme of eternity, but
yeah, sure,
it
yeah,
is
yeah,
it is a long time, 44 years. And
yeah, sure. But yeah, I didn't spend all my time, you know, in temples, you know, on my knees, like praying, you know. It was like, yeah, I mean, I went to stay in the manor 1981 and went to stay like in Chaitanya College in 1981. That
wow,
was
I
good.
never
It
knew
was
that.
a very good experience. I found when I was in the environment of the temple, I didn't, you know, I didn't want to break the principles or anything. At that time in my life, I was, you know, breaking the four regulative principles every day. But when I went to the temple, it was like, I didn't feel the urge to do that, you know, and actually, you know, I was like, the devotees are worshipable because they love the animals, you know. That touched me. That touched my heart. It was like, well, these people actually do love the animals because you know I was, you know, a bit of an animal lover. I always had my pet dogs, pet rabbits, budgie, goldfish. You know, I always had my pets and I loved them. And yeah, when I saw that the devotees actually followed principles and called the cows first names, and you know that appealed.
Mm.
That's what appealed to me. Actually, that was the first thing that touched me about the Hare Krishna movement. That the devotees genuinely loved the animals. You
Mm.
know.
And for most of that, I mean, I think I do. It's all coming back to me now. What you told me 2 years ago, I've heard so many stories. I forget everyone's the
Yeah.
details. But for most of those 44 years, you've resided with or alongside a particular community, haven't you?
Yeah, well, since 90, I first went to Karuna Bhavan in Scotland, 1988. I was working at the time, so I was only visiting at the weekends. It was, I mean, it was nice at the time. It was a very good part of my life. I'd come out the kind of junkie scene in London, you know, because I mean, I was in and out of temples, but I was still kind of living in squats, and you know, there was always plenty of books around and people chanting Hare Krishna in the squats. You know, it wasn't like yeah, yeah, it was. I mean, there was a bit of a loving scene around there, you know. I mean, it wasn't, you know, all degradation, you know. There was, you know, Krishna consciousness was part of the scene, you know. And I got a bit fed up with the, you know, with the drugs and drink, there's always trouble. So, yeah, I got a bit fed up with that and I completely gave up that kind of lifestyle, 1988. Yeah, and I started visiting Karuna Bhavan at the weekends. I was working in Edinburgh and coming across and staying at the weekends. So, yeah, that was 1988. And I moved in to Karuna Bhavan Temple 1989. And
Wow.
I did book distribution. I remember it was like um, Prabhupada Charan took me out my first day of book distribution, you know, and it was like, you know, I collected like £150 and distributed 100 books in my first day, and it was like the devotees were all very surprised. It was like, you know, they couldn't believe it. How did you do that? And I was like, well, you know, I have plenty of training on the streets, you know, like selling, you know, this, that, and the next thing. I was, you know, from the way I was brought up,
Mm.
you know, from a kid, you know, you learn to get the sweetie money on the street, you know. I'd be selling something around the doors, potatoes or, you know, whatever. So yeah, I was
So,
well used.
I mean, yeah, 1988, 1989, that was 35, 36 years ago.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure, yeah.
it's, yeah, I mean, well, it is, again, it isn't a long time. It is a long time in one sense. I mean, in 90, I don't, in 1988, I was 4 years old.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I'm just a little bit younger than you.
yeah, sure,
So
yeah.
35 years is a long time. Tell us a bit about
Yeah.
some of the services or the savers that you've been involved with over all those decades.
Yeah, sure. Well, book distribution was the main thing, like in the 90s in the Karuna Bhavan. I mean, it was world famous as one of the top book distributing the top like book distribution temples in the world. So also I had a keen interest. The job I had when I started visiting Karuna Bhavan was like gardening. So I've always had a keen interest in growing food and flowers. And so I used to do that service at Karuna Bhavan too. I'd do book distribution maybe 5 days a week and then do the garden for two. And then say about 95, I kind of was just doing full time on the grounds, like growing flowers, fruit, veg, things like that. Then I went to Edinburgh and did some training at a gardening project, in like the Botanic Gardens and different wall gardens around Scotland.
Wow.
Yeah, I wanted to learn how to grow things properly on a large scale because, the temple was expanding. So, if I was going to grow fruit and veg and flowers for the temple, I wanted to learn how to do it properly because, if the community is dependent on it, if the flowers are for the deities and the displays on the altar, then, you have to know how, well, I have to know what I'm doing and how to do it properly and have a backup and a backup from a backup. And so I went and learned properly. It was a government scheme I did. And the facilities were very good. And the government, I just went there to learn gardening training, but the government people were all like, well, what's this you're into? What's this tempo and can we help? And after they got to know me a little while, they were like, they really wanted to help out. And quite a few of them did help out. They gave us references for grants and, they came along to the temple and, they helped out in a big way, even after I'd finished the government training course, I have to admit the government, really, really, I was really happy with that. And they were happy with me too, we had a really, we still have got a really good relationship, so
I mean,
it's nice.
when I first met you, I'm pretty sure it was 2016.
Yeah,
You were gardening then. I first visited Karuna Bhavan 8 years ago, and you were.
yeah, sure, yeah,
I remember seeing you in the garden doing lots of fancy stuff. I mean,
yeah,
um, and I always think when I always think of you, I think of someone who's gardening. I mean, you've written a book, haven't you? Called I think it's called
yeah,
Bhakti in the Garden. Um,
yeah,
just
yeah,
remind us a bit about your book.
yeah, gardening the Bhakti yoga way, yeah, it's a horticultural therapy book. It's basically love the plants or love the souls in the plants and love yourself for loving the plants and offer Krishna with love and devotion a leaf or flower or fruit or some water and, love yourself for doing that. It's like, Krishna consciousness is actually about love, which I think sometimes it gets put, secondary rather than the important thing, Because, I mean, what did Prabhupada do when he went to New York? He didn't tell people, you've got to get up early, you've got to keep clean and follow four regulative principles. He told them to chant Hare Krishna and take prasadam, And because he wasn't stupid, he knew if I tell all these people, there's a lot of rules and regulations, they'll just all go away, So the love is the important thing there, and so I've tried to get that mood across in the book and how much fun it can be growing, fruit, vegetables and flowers, how, we can make the world more beautiful in that way. We can cultivate good relationships with each other, I mean, someone recommended, one volunteers, recommended at the temple, all the devotees should go out in the garden and work along with the volunteers and it would help devotees get on with each other, because it's such a beautiful occupation. If you're serving with enthusiasm. It's like, you know, you get fired up, and then everyone sits together and takes a prasadam that, you know, we've spent our time growing and harvesting and preparing and cooking. It's like that in itself is a great occasion, you know. And you know, it's great sitting there and everybody saying, "Oh, is this from the garden? Is this, you know, is it salad from the garden?" And you're sitting there saying, "Yes." And everybody's like really enjoying themselves. It's such a buzz, you know. It's I mean, we want to get high in Krishna consciousness, right? We don't want to be like, you know, like fault finding and that all the time, right? I mean, it's like there is a very nice, you know, side and buzz, and if we do things properly and, you know, without being fanatical, you know, without being fanatical, it's like it's very important not to be fanatical, you know.
And I know you're being super humble because you're quite a humble guy, but as far as I understand, I did a bit because I did a bit of research for today. You've been involved or been behind some big projects at Karuna Bhavan over the years. I mean,
Yeah,
I think that there's the woofing program.
yeah, right, yeah,
And
yeah,
did
yeah.
you help set that up, establish that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I first suggested it really, because the gardening project I told you I did with the government, I did placements at different wall gardens around Scotland, and there was always volunteers at these projects. And quite a lot of these volunteers had been to a restaurant or stayed on a Hare Krishna farm or been to Sunday programs, you know. So I suggested it at the tempo, and Prabhu Prana decided to take it up. He did ask me that it would, you know, did I want to work with volunteers? I said, yes, no problem. It's like, you know, I've been kind of living that kind of life since I was 21. You know, I mean, when I first went to the temple, like I told you, when I was 20, I was living in London, but we used to go down to Kent and, like, you know, pick the fruit. You know how there's a lot of fruit picking in Kent? Well, you know, when you get fed up with the squat and junkie style life, you know, go out in the country and pick some fruit for like, you know, a month or two and kind of like get yourself back together again. So I used to do that, go down to Kent and pick like apples, pears, potatoes, things, you know. So, and we used to work with volunteers and things. So, I mean, I've been doing that since I was 21, you know,
Mm.
like it wasn't anything new for me, you know, to work with volunteers, you know, on the land, but it was new for a lot of devotees, you know, and I think that caused a bit of difficulty. For me, it was just an everyday, it was normal every day, but devotees were like, oh, wow, you know, these people are all coming to the temple, and it was like, you know, they thought it was great and fantastic, which it was, but I was kind of used to hanging around with people that, you know, they'd be working on the land or they'd be hanging out in squats and they'd be a bit into Krishna consciousness. That was, I mean, that was normal life for me. But for devotees, a lot of them were just used to devotees in temples. Then there was the public, and they weren't really, the only way they were really related to the public is distributing a book and getting some money. So it did cause a little bit of difficulty. I mean, the man woman thing did cause a bit of difficulty, you know, because Timone's got the idea if we only have men on the voluntary project, then we can make brahmacharis, you know. The temple needs brahmacharis. Let's just have men on the project. I was like, no, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's, you know, if women want to come along, don't stop them, you know. It's not that I want to hang out with women in the garden, but if they want to come along, don't stop them. And, you know, the devotees at the temple, well, some of them thought, well, if there's women there, it would distract the men and we won't be able to make brahmacharis. But I was like, well, the garden project isn't set up to make brahmacharis. It's set up to work the land. Volunteers can come along, have a good experience and take it out into the world. And if we do it properly, there will be some people that want to stay, naturally want to stay, you know. So that caused a bit of difficulty, to say the least.
Mm. Mm. So
Yeah,
the whole kind of Krishna Eco-Farm, which is also which is where Karuna Bhavan is located, and what also
yeah.
Karuna Bhavan is known as, the Krishna Eco-Farm, which has won many awards over the years. Did you play an instrumental role in developing that and setting it up?
Oh yeah, of course. Since 1989, I was growing potatoes in 1989. I was growing flowers in 1989. I used to look after the garden even when Balab Badra and his wife were there. Balab Badra's wife was a great gardener. She used to encourage me a lot to like grow, and yeah, that was way back in the early 90s. And actually, I used to collect a lot of money as well to buy the land and buy the greenhouses and buy the houses in the community. I spent a lot of time in the hail, rain, and snow, not only collecting but distributing books. I mean, I would give somebody a Krishna book and present it to them first and ask for money for it. I wasn't out just collecting. I was giving people books and encouraging them to be Krishna conscious, and I was successful. I did encourage some people to come along and join the temple, and they did a lot of service as well for Eco-Farm. So yeah, I mean, most of the 90s I spent distributing books and fundraising and working on the land a bit. Then I went and did the training in Edinburgh and around Scotland. Then I came back to the Eco-Farm and started growing on a large scale, and
Wow.
so it, and I got the government involved as well. The government people that I trained with, and all the wall gardens I worked at around the country. PR Pranas asked me to go and get references of them so we could get grants from the government, because the government weren't just going to give the Hare Krishna temple a grant. What do they do for society? So we had to prove that we worked with the community, because I was working in a lot of community gardens at the time that were doing a lot of welfare work. So I got references of all the people I worked for, and that that got us grants, and invited all the people that I worked for to the official opening of the Krishna Eco-Farm, and basically I spent a lot of the last like 30 years building up the farming side of things. I mean,
Wow.
I've done more on the farming side of things than anybody else in ISKCON for Karuna Bhavan. By far,
I don't doubt that at all. I don't doubt that at all. I mean,
by far. I mean, I'm like the farmer, I'm the farmer. I'm the man that's actually been out there, raised the funds, done the training, and worked the land.
hmm.
And with volunteers and with government. And yeah, it's been a tremendous success in many, many ways. The difficulty is in our conflicts with devotees. I'm like, because I've worked the land and mixed with people in a certain way that's a bit different from the devotees at the temple, then the devotees are like at the temple are like, we're doing it our way, and I'm like, well, it won't work. It won't work. And they're like, well, we're doing it anyway, and it's like, and then it doesn't work, and then they say to me, sorry, it didn't work, and I said, I told you that, it's been a bit like that, although we're managing to get things done, because we've gone from one house to like about 30 houses, and from a couple of acres of land to like 12 acres of land. So it is expanding slowly. I mean, we are working on like better relations between devotees and better management and things like that.
I want to come on to that in a minute, the more recent history. But can you just
Yeah.
confirm something? You've just said about 30 houses. Do you mean that Karuna Bhavan currently owns 30 houses?
Well, about 30 properties, I think, around about that, I'd say maybe. Well, at least like, I think at least 25. I'm not absolutely certain because I don't, but yeah, I would say it's round about maybe 25 or so, you know.
So Karuna, so just to give some of our viewers, I just clarify for our viewers and listeners because we've got a global audience. Karuna Bhavan is a temple, a farm temple owned by ISKCON in a town called Lesmahago, which is in Scotland. It's about 40 minutes driving south of Glasgow. So from where I am in the southwest of England, and probably from London as well, it's around a 6-hour drive door to door. I've driven it many times. I know how long it takes. And I was aware that Karuna Bhavan, as in the organization or the temple, owned a number of properties in the town of Lesmahago, but I didn't know it could be up to 25, possibly.
Yeah, I don't know exactly myself, but I know it's like over the 20 mark
And
anyway.
and a lot of them will be houses that people live in, and Karuna
Yeah,
Bhavan rents them out
yeah,
and
sure, that's fair.
receives
Yeah.
an income from the rentees, the rent,
Yeah,
you know.
there is. Yeah, sure. There is a warehouse and there's some outbuildings and things like that. Counting all the buildings,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
There's halls, there's, yeah, the buildings, yeah, it must be 25, 30 or something,
Okay, okay. So before we get on to kind of recent history, I still want to just talk a little bit about the history of Karuna Bhavan in terms of the last 35 years. As far as I'm aware, there's been at least 3 temple presidents in that 35, 40 years. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah.
But today we'll probably only really talk about 2 of them because the one in the middle, I don't know much about him. So could we just talk a bit about Balab Badra?
Yeah.
Just tell us a bit about him, and from your perspective, what was it like living there under his, or staying there under his leadership?
Yeah, Balab Badra, yeah. Yeah, first, I met him at the manor actually in about 85, but yeah, he was the main man here in Scotland for like, nearly 20 years. When I first came along, he lived with his wife and his 2 children, Kunti and a boy. Kunti was around about sort of 8, a boy was about maybe 11 when I first came along. So they were a very nice family. I mean, Balab Badra was an ISKCON guru when he was like 37 years old. His wife, he had a beautiful wife and 2 children, and, his disciples, and, we were making a lot of money and distributing a lot of books. It was a nice scene, it was very, very nice. And I mean, with Balab Badra, it was like a very strict program. You had to be up for the morning program, you had to be attentive in the morning prayers. It was like Prabhupada Charan and Gurudjuma Bihari were there, and it was like prasadam, then straight out on books. Don't waste any time, and like back in the evening. And his wife used to make, I mean, such wonderful prasadam in the evenings. It was like pancakes, strawberry tarts, apple crumble. I mean, totally. She was the most amazing cook I've ever come across in ISKCON. Her prasadam, it was like worth joining. It was worth joining just for her prasadam. I'm not joking. You'd be getting out in the car in the morning and the driver would be like, oh, that rice was amazing. And I'd say to him, I was just thinking the exact same thing myself. It was like just a spoonful of rice was totally amazing. She had such high consciousness. But what happened was she left her body. She was only 42 years old. So in 1994, she left her body of cancer. She went back to Godhead, according to all accounts. And so she left her body, and it left Balab Badra with 2 kids, and it was quite, it was a very, she was his closest associate, basically. She was you know, she was a very, very powerful devotee, you know. So he kind of lost the plot a bit after his wife died, you know. I can remember him sitting on the Vyasa crying and, you know, in front of his disciples. And I mean, when I think back, I think, well, maybe we could have done something. Maybe we could have done something to try and console him, try and, you know, because sometimes the mood can be in a temple, well, there's a bag of a Gita, chant your rounds, you know. It's like, you know, but somebody's wife of, you know, 25 years has just died, his closest associate, who was a very nice devotee. I mean, he's allowed to feel a wee bit and, you know, be emotional, but, you know, that wasn't always the mood. So I think he slowly went downhill after that. I think he slowly went downhill. And by the time the GBC kind of got to him, it was like, you know, it was kind of too late because, you know, it's like reading Andhra Swami says the occupational hazard of a guru is everybody just key jives everything you say, you know. So everybody had been just key jiving Balab Badra for like 10 or 15 years, you know. And so by the time the GBC got to him, it was like, well, you know, they couldn't get through to him and convince him he was kind of off, you know. Yeah, it was like, I mean, I spoke out about Balab Badra myself. I spoke out about him myself in 1997, 98. But, you know, certain people complained about me and I was asked to leave, you know, I was asked to leave because I spoke out about him. And the people that complained about me later claimed abuse from him. So they can't blame me, you know, because they backed him up when I spoke out about him. There was all these kind of things going on. It's not all so straightforward. I mean, there was very, very good times under Balab Badra. I had a wonderful time. I've got a lot of happy memories, but, you know, he did go off the rails, you know.
And just to summarize, because I know he was removed by ISKCON, I think in 2005 or
Yeah,
six
right,
or
yeah.
seven around that time. He was removed as a guru, as temple president or whatever. Just to summarize, what were why was he removed from office, so to speak?
Well, he wasn't treating the disciples. Some of the disciples he wasn't treating properly, you know. And yeah, they made serious complaints about him, which I mean, they are
I mean,
justified.
yeah. Okay. I mean, I've heard lots of stories of abuse. Yeah. I mean, I guess we're not going to dwell too much on Badra Badra today. I mean, his story has been well documented. I think it was well documented on the front page of the Sun newspaper back back at the time he was ousted.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
But there's lots of accusations around different types of abuse and the way he was running the temple.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Yeah, it was, you know, it was a one-man show, which ISKCON shouldn't have really allowed, you know. They shouldn't have allowed that because, I mean, it's okay blaming him, but he was in an organisation. Somebody put him in the position he was in. Somebody allowed him to continue with his abusive behaviour too, even although people spoke out about it. So, yeah, and the disciples weren't all, you know, the angels, you know, that, you know, they weren't all, you know, following everything they wanted either. And another point is Balab Badra tended to treat the disciples like children, you know, and it's not healthy to treat adults like children, you know. I didn't like that. I moved out the temple. I just moved out. And, you know, a thing I've noticed as well that, you know, a thing I've learned over the last, say, 15 years is I'll never let anyone treat me like a child again, you know. So, you know, yeah, Balab Badra was treating people like children, and you know, it was like, you know, yeah.
I mean, and it was mainly accusations, I think, wasn't it, around psychological abuse, mental abuse, and yeah, like treating people like children in terms of
Yeah, sure,
regulating when they
yeah.
eated, who they spoke to. Kind of, I don't want to. Okay, I'm going to use this word. Kind of cult-like leadership.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it was to some extent. Yeah, sure. But I mean, the disciples were getting treated pretty well as well. I mean, it was nothing to have like a 60,000 pound motorhome sitting out the front, you know. I mean, it wasn't he was being cruel. It was like, oh, if you want, I'll give you a 60,000 pound motorhome to go and tour the country in, and he would provide that for disciples, and he would sit and ask, well, what types of cars do you want? It wasn't, we could have helped him a lot more, as well. When we saw him first going downhill, we could have helped him a lot, He was open and honest. He was heartbroken that his wife had died, and then nobody tried to console him or help him. And yeah, one other point I can make as well: Balab Badra was temple president of Bhaktivedanta Manor and Chaitanya College in the 80s.
Wow, I
And I
didn't know
mean,
that.
yes, yes. And he was asked to come to Scotland. They actually asked Balab Badra to come to Scotland. He didn't really want to come here. And because Balab Badra had been temple president of the Manor and Chaitanya College, he knew a lot of the goings on that went on there. I mean, there was a lot of kind of scandal and all the rest of it in the 80s, at the Manor and Chaitanya College and everything. And Balab Badra knew everything that went on. So he was sent to Scotland, and he was like, okay, we'll try and set an example here, but he didn't want much to do with, really a lot to do with the rest of ISKCON, because he'd seen what went on at the Manor and Chaitanya College over a long period of time in the 80s,
And just before we move on, Bhakti, for I guess for issues of fairness and transparency, I've actually tried to reach out to Balab Badra a few times over the last 4 years, 5 years actually. I'm not going to say where he's living, but he's still alive as far as we know. And he has some disciples that have stayed loyal to him, and I mean, look after him. I mean, he's got to be what, over 75 now, close to 80 maybe.
Yeah.
And
older, I mean, he kind of, he did a lot for ISKCON, and he did go off the rails. There's no doubt about that. But I mean, I think ISKCON can, they can look at themselves as well regarding him. It's no point in blaming him on everything. It's like,
and just so kind of well, feeding into what you're saying, I would love to interview Balab Badra, either via podcast. I wanted to interview him for my book. There's a bit about him in the book, but that was through third-party accounts. As far as we know, he's still alive. And I would be happy to, even if he's listening or one of his disciples listening, I'd be happy to travel to Scotland to interview him, to meet him.
I don't think he would be. I don't think he would be interested.
It's a shame.
He just sits in a room himself most of the time these days. You see, doesn't really communicate with people. He doesn't go out the house. He just, he just sits in the room. And me and my wife went up to speak to him probably about a year ago or so, and we were talking to him, and he wasn't defending himself. He wasn't denying or defending. It was just like, okay, he was just getting on with his life,
Right.
I mean, I feel I could have been a better disciple, definitely.
So just before we move on, Balab Badra, if you're listening, or one of your disciples listening, the offer's there. I'd love to interview Balab Badra. Happy to come to Scotland. Okay, so after Balab Badra, just very briefly, there was another temple president. I think it was
Prabhupada
Padani.
Yeah, he was a great Sankirtan man, Prabhupada Badra. He headed up like a Sankirtan party that used to do like the Midlands in England, Huddersfield and Sheffield and Leeds and places. I stayed with him. I was on his party for about 6 months, you know, and I mean, that guy headed up a party for, it must have been at least 10 years, and it was a plate of kitchery every day, and then out on the street, hail, rain, or snow, 6 days a week, and you know, book distribution. I mean, that guy did amazing service, and he headed up a party, and I mean, he was really austere. He was really responsible. The problem with him, right? The problem that I can see anyway, right, is after 15 years on the street, right, living a really austere monastic type life, right, they put him on the side of a hill, give him a couple of, £1 million, and, the account sort of thing, and have a couple of women, like, around the temple, and all the other men are out. It's nobody's going to last like that, especially if you've been on the street distributing books for 15 years, So, because I could see if I was in his situation, I would keep a couple of men with me, because if you're in a temple and there's only women around and all the men are out, it's like you're going to get caught,
Just to clarify, when you say on the streets, you don't mean homeless. You mean
no, distributing books on the.
I know. For a minute, I thought, oh, he was homeless for 15 years.
No. He was like on the street distributing books for like 10, 15 years.
Yeah. And how long was he? Sorry, go ahead.
And he was a genuine, sincere, humble devotee during those years, It wasn't he was some kind of like womanizer, but when he became temple president, it was just, I think, the comfort and the responsibility of the bank account and women around and, all the other men out in Sankirtan. It was just that, I think it was just too much for him,
And how long was he temple president for?
Yeah, he didn't last long. Yeah, I don't know, maybe 5 years or so, at the most.
And where is he now? Is he still alive? Or?
He's living in Scotland. He's living in Cumbernauld.
Okay. I mean, do you see him? Do you have contact with him? Or?
Occasionally, yeah.
Okay. All right. So what happened after that? Why did he stop being temple president?
Well, he was asked to leave too. Yeah, he was asked to leave due to his affairs with women.
Okay.
And I think spending some of the money on himself as well. And he got involved with a few women, And I mean, he got involved with a few women. And the problem was as well, right? He had a wife, right? But she was in India. So he got involved with one of the women here and he had a kid with her. But he wasn't honest and open with MD about it. So this woman's walking around the temple with a kid, and Prabhupada Padani's temple president, but he's taking nothing to do with this kid, you see, for like years, And so then when people realized what happened was, right, he started hanging around with Balab Badra's son. And at that time, Balab Badra's son had a fiance, So when what happened was Prabhupada Padani ran away with a boy's fiance, right? So then this woman that had the kid came forward and said, "It's his kid," So it wasn't looking very good for him. And, it was like, if he'd have been honest with that in the very beginning, he could have, stayed and it could have been like sorted out. But he was too afraid to be honest in case, you know, he lost respect, he lost, you know, sort of.
I gave a talk last year where I compared, and I meant this in a comical way, and I meant this in a joking way, that I compared the Hare Krishna movement to a soap opera or an episode of EastEnders,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
it's like,
yeah, well, yeah, Rampa said that, you know, when all this kind of stuff was going on, Rampa's like, this is worse than Coronation Street, you know.
yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean,
it
this is
does get like that. It definitely does get like that. I mean, people that like soap operas, they might as well join the Hare Krishna temple because you've got more happening, you know, there, you know, who's going with who and, you know, who's like, you know, just, you know, went off with some of the money and all the rest of it, you know, it's like, and who's, you know, who's is a kid and all the rest of it, you know, it's like, you'd be better in the Hare Krishna movement watching like Emmerdale or you know
Emmerdale. My
Coronation
parents
Street.
watch Emmerdale. So can we now move on to Temple President number 3?
Yeah,
Uh,
Prabhupada Karuna, yeah.
so that was around 2010.
Yeah, about 2000, yeah, around about that time to 8 to 9, yeah.
Okay, so he became temple president. He's still temple president now.
Yeah, yeah,
So 15, 16 years. Tell us
yeah.
a bit about why he was chosen or selected as temple president.
Well, I think it's because he'd been around for so long, you know. I think also he'd always a desire to be like he always had a desire to be like in charge, and you know I've known him a while, and you know he always wanted to be in charge of the party, and you know he always wanted like a good motorhome and things like that, you know. So it was absolutely, that was his heart's desire, you know, to become temple president. He's got, you know, the purse strings and he's the boss, so he was in his element, you know. That was him, like, you know, got it made, you know. Because I mean, some people want to be temple presidents. I'm not at all enamored by positions of authority. I don't want to be a temple president or even sannyasi, or I'm not bothered about being an initiating guru, you know. I mean, positions don't really enamor me, or I don't need to have a position to enjoy within and be happy inside in Krishna consciousness, you know. I don't need that, you know, that kind of you know, I don't need that kind of
So,
um
I mean, I've seen at least one photo of a group of devotees at Karuna Bhavan from the early 80s. I mean, you might have even been in that photo, but I remember seeing PR Prana in the photo, and a Dakshaya Krishna in the photo as well. And I actually think it was PR Prana that showed me the photo, to be honest. And I think, wow, that was so long ago, 40 years ago. So Prabhupada Prana has been around a long time. And in your opinion, what has the temple been like? I have to stress that. In your opinion, what has it been like under Prabhupada Prana's leadership over the last 15, 16 years?
if you're a friend of Prabhupada Prana is very good. If you're not, you know, it can be not very good at all, you know. It was very much, you know, uh, who, uh, who was friends with him, you know, to be honest, you know. Uh, if you were friends with him and, you know, said yes to everything he said, then he wanted you around. If you disagreed with him and put things forward, that he wanted to do everything his way, and if you know, wanted to do things another way, it was like, well, you know, go somewhere else, sort of thing, you know. It was that kind of mood. Prana's very much like want to do things his way, and if you know, um,
Mm.
you know, I'll say it, surround himself by yes men, and if you know, you don't like that, he'll, you know, he'll just kind of, well, this is the past. He's changed a bit now, but, you know, it wasn't very pleasant for me, I'll be honest. I'll be honest. They say Balab Badra was a big abuser. Things were, you know, I enjoyed more in the Balab Badra days than the PR Pranas days, you know. I mean, I don't know. I think it was taken out. It was very, you know, I think he was taking his anger and frustration out of me, to be honest, you know, because he didn't really like doing the Prana didn't really like doing the street in the Sankirtan, and I loved it. I was in my element on the street distributing books. And I think it was a bit too austere for Prana, and you know, he wasn't the top Sankirtan man and all that, and you know, it was very austere for him. And yeah, I mean, I had my differences with Prana over the years, you know. And yeah, it got really difficult at times, and that's why I approached the higher management. You know, I approached the Krishna ombuds about it, you know, and says, look, you know, this guy's got a misunderstanding about me, you know. Can you help us resolve this misunderstanding? They couldn't, so it went to the UK Management Council, you know, and they did a like review. But Prana was smart enough to make friends with the trustees, you know. You know, I dare say it was a move so that if anyone said anything about him, then, you know, his friends would be on his side, you know, which actually, you know, was the case, you know, which actually was the case.
I think if we can rewind a little bit, I think from what you've told me before, a lot of this came to a head around 4.5 years ago,
Yeah.
when you were, how do I best say it? You were removed from your services.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's another right. Yeah, I was, you know, I might as well talk about it and get it out in public. I mean, Prana sat in front of me and said, you're mentally ill, I'll help you, you know. And I was like, I didn't ask you for help, you know, it's my life. It's not, you know, you're not going to try and control me. I mean, that guy was telling me who to talk to, what to talk to them about, who to sit beside, you know. Like, don't talk to guests, don't talk to volunteers. He was treating me like that, you know. And it was like so eventually it basically Prana decided that he would take over my life and control it, basically. And so eventually it got to the stage where he sent me a letter saying I was obsessed with members of the community and I shouldn't go on the property until I'd seen a doctor. So no one complained I was obsessed with them. What happened was volunteers approached me and complained about, you know, a certain person, you know. And so I put the complaints forward to Prabhupada Prana, and but the person the volunteers were complaining about happened to be a family member of one of the temple council, a close associate of Prabhupada Prana, Hare Krishna. And so it was turned back on me. It was like, it wasn't even me, it was complaining, it was volunteers, and they were rightly complaining about this person. There was no doubt they had good grounds for complaints. And so I put it forward to Prana, and he sent me a letter saying, you're obsessed, don't come back on the property till you've seen a doctor. So it was basically, I got barred for Prana's, you know, diagnosing me, which is completely wrong. It's, you know, because he thinks something doesn't mean to say it's right, you know. And I mean, I was 60 years old, and you know, it was like growing fruit and veg and flowers and chanting Hare Krishna in the morning, and my service was good. So I mean, if I'm not, you know, if I'm so mentally ill I can't go on the property, then there's no hope for the Hare Krishna movement whatsoever, you know. They're not going to help anyone according to, you know, Prana's view of things, you know. So what happened anyway was I got to, as I said, I was working with the government, you know, and I'd introduced a local councillor to Prabhupada Prana, and Prabhupada Prana done an event with him, and I wasn't invited, so the councillor was asking where I was, so I went down to see the local councillor. I told him why I wasn't at the event, and he says, go and see my wife. His wife is a local MP. So me and my wife went down to see the local MP, and I told her about the situation. And she wrote a letter to the temple president, Prabhupada Prana, saying I was fine and there was no problem. And when I told her that Prana told me I was mentally ill and he'd help me, she was just laughing. She's a qualified psychologist, by the way. She's a doctor of psychology. As far as I know, she advises the government on mental health. So she knows a lot more about that than Prabhupada Prana. You know, he shouldn't have got involved in that at all. He made a big mistake, you know.
So can you just clarify, are you banned, or have you been told that you're banned?
Well, that's the ban that I'm telling you about. That's the ban. It's not really, it's just a lot of nonsense, really. And even although he's had a letter from a psychologist, a doctor, he's still like, he can't come on the property. And I've been saying, well, give me it in writing, but he won't give me it in writing. It's just a whole load of nonsense that he made up, and he's decided even although I've proved him wrong, he's decided he's still not letting me on the property. So that's, you know, we're trying to sort that out with the higher management, but they seem to be very favourable towards him. And no matter how many times I say, in your code of ethics, you say you have to give someone something in writing, I receive nothing in writing. So what's happened is this, they had a review, and then the trustees, they made conclusions. So the trustees' conclusion is, you know, my ban, so-called ban, which isn't even an official ban, is bottom of the list in the priorities, completely bottom of the list. And, you know, not only that, but Prabhupada Prana will be one of the ones reviewing my so-called ban. So, I mean, it's just like, okay, you know, it was like, you know, he's reviewing his own, like, you know, mistakes, you know. It's like,
so let's use the word ban. It's a horrible word, but let's say you've been banned for 4.5 years, and it's not been put in writing, and you're not completely sure of the full reasons why. Just so the audience are aware, I was telling Bhakti before I hit the record button that I know someone that has killed somebody, right? So we shouldn't laugh really, but we grew up on the same estate, and I still know him. He killed someone. It was an accident, or he said it was an accident, and he quite rightly went to prison for manslaughter and was out after 2.5 years. So someone has killed someone and gets 2.5 years in prison, and Bhakti is not allowed to visit his local Hare Krishna temple that he's served for 30 or 40 years for the past 4.5 years. And there seems to be no end in sight as to when that ban will be lifted, if it is a ban. And so I can understand your frustrations because of that.
I think, yeah, it will be sorted out soon, but 4.5 years later, you know, it's like, I mean, it's like, yeah, it's, yeah, I mean, basically it's just due to Prabhupada Prana's, I suppose, dislike. I mean, because, yeah, he may think I'm obsessed, but, you know, it doesn't mean to say he's right, you know. He gave me no names of those I was obsessed with, and no one complained I was obsessed with them either, you know. So I don't know where he got that from, but he decided I was obsessed, and that was it. I was off the property, you know. The whole thing, I'll be honest and say, right, the whole thing from 210 to 219 was a bit of a shambles, you know, at Karuna Bhavan. It was a shambles, you know. I mean, I'm not beating about the bush. I was, you know, I mean, to say it was poorly managed is an understatement.
Tell us a bit about, from your experience, what was happening at Karuna Bhavan between 210 and 219.
Well, there was, you know, the people went living in the ashrams were drinking, eating meat. The ashrams were dirty. You know, the police came once and closed the place down for a day and searched the whole place. Some guy had been on, you know, child porn computer or something, you know, and there was a lot of discontent between me, the volunteers, and the management. It was like, you know, there was a lot of you know, lack of communication. The management were doing one thing, but, you know, they were basically, you know, working in a way to maintain the tempo and maintain their lifestyles. And, you know, I was trying to serve in a way that was, you know, if a volunteer come along, my mood was, we do what's best for them. We don't try and manipulate the situation so the temple can just gain out it, you know. It's like, okay, a volunteer comes along, if we manipulate the situation, we might get that guy to join the temple for 5 years. But 5 years later, he's going to go away just thinking he's been used, you know. So why not just deal with him properly in the beginning? And, you know, my idea is to spread Krishna consciousness, not to maintain my lifestyle or a temple. It's like, if we deal with a volunteer properly, they'll have a good experience at the temple, take it out into the world and give the Krishna consciousness to the world. If we manipulate the situation for our own ends, then we may get people to stay and join, but after a while they'll just drift away when they realize nobody really cares. You know, nobody really cares about them. It's more what they want out of them, you know. Because I realized myself while I was doing this voluntary program that when they barred the women from the gardening project, I realized they don't really care about me as a person. They're not interested in the way I work. They're not interested in me as a person. They appreciate what I'm doing if they're making out it. But as far as how I work and, you know, they weren't really interested. They didn't take that into account. They didn't talk to me about management decisions. They were just like, we're doing it our way, and we've got to maintain this tempo, and we are going to, like, you know, use people to do that come along. And I'm like, well, that's not very Krishna conscious. We should be serving people and doing what's best for them. So it took, you know, things are getting a bit better, but I mean, there's been a lot of kind of devotees don't want to go to the temple. And MD that spoke out was told basically they weren't welcome to serve at the temple. And, you know, as far as I know, the Karuna Bhavan was advertising for gardeners, pujaris, and other devotees to do service. And there's devotees that could do all that service sitting in Karuna Bhavan, sitting in Les Mahego. So it was just a case of, you know, Prana wanted to manage in a certain style. And if you didn't go along with it, then you weren't welcome. And his style was basically maintaining his life, his friends, and surrounding himself by yes men, you know. I won't beat about the bush. That's the way he was doing it. And, you know, I'm not, you know, but there's a review of my band coming up, you know. And so I'm told Prana's going to be one of the ones reviewing it. So I'm going to be straightforward with him as well. I've already written and told him, you know, it won't be treating me in the way it treated me in the past. I'm not going to allow it any longer, you know. And you know, if he continues to keep devotees away, then, you know, Krishna will make arrangements that he won't be in a position to do that. So,
so just to contextualize or to add some information to what you're saying, Bhakti. So if I'm honest, when I first heard about, I don't like the word ban because it's so negative. When I first heard about the issues between you and the leadership at Karuna Bhavan, must have been 3 years ago. I thought that it was probably maybe just an isolated incident. You know, there's an issue here between Bhakti and the leadership. And I thought nothing of it, if I'm honest. And then you start to hear things. People start to talk. And, you know, I guess I've got two hats. I'm a devotee, or I try and be a devotee. I don't think I'm very good at it. And I also work in the media and journalism, and you start to hear things and people start to contact me. And okay, I'm going to say some stuff now that might not be in the public domain. One of them certainly is. But there was pretty much a mass walkout of the congregation of Karuna Bhavan in, I think it was 2022 now, possibly, so almost 2 years ago. I'm not going to say the names of the individuals that have left because they've not given me permission to do so, but there was literally a mass walkout of the congregation at Karuna Bhavan. And these are devotees that have been serving for decades. Anyone who visited Karuna Bhavan before 2022, 2021, you would have seen these devotees around all the time. They were like the die-hard loyalists at Karuna Bhavan. And you kind of think, if these guys go, something's seriously wrong. And I remember when they were there, a lot of these devotees, the temple was stretched as it was in terms of we haven't got enough people to do this and do that. And then you find out that these guys have left. And then, like, literally the penny dropped from me. I remember in the summer of 2022 that things literally had got that bad at Karuna Bhavan that there was this mass walkout.
well,
and go ahead. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, it wasn't so much a mass walkout. It was more like devotees weren't welcome to serve. They were offering their service, but they were told by the management, we don't need your service here, you know. We don't want your service here, you know. So that led to, like, you know, approaching the ombuds and UK National Council, and because devotees have put a lot of time, energy and money into the project. You know, it doesn't belong to Prabhupada Pranas, you know. Devotees have got a right to serve there, to use those facilities to spread Krishna consciousness. I will say things are getting better now. I would say Prabhupada Pranas changed he has improved his attitude. And the National Council and the trustees are, you know, they're more part of things now. Prana can't just do what he wants now, you know. And his attitude has improved. I mean, I'll be honest and say if Prana's attitude hadn't improved over the last couple of years, I would be gung-ho, just, you know, he has to go, you know, and I wouldn't back off from it. But right now I'm like, okay, he has improving. He has apologized to me on a couple of occasions, you know, and it looks like due to the intervention of the management council, and the government, that, you know, Prana now is very restricted in what he can do. It's no longer a one-man show. It's like he has to, you know, go along with things. He's on a trial for, like, you know, 3 months, and if he doesn't get it right, he'll be removed. And so things are improving, and yeah, the management.
Can you just repeat that? You say that Prabhupada Prana is now on a 3-year trial? Did you say 3 or 3 months?
No, it's on it like 3 months.
That's not very long.
No, well, it's going to be reviewed every, like, 4 months or every, you know, it's like that. His management's going to be reviewed. I mean, Prabhupada Prana is very lucky he's still temple president, you know. I mean, you know.
Can we come back to that in a minute? Because I do in a minute. I want to talk more about what you're talking about and what's happening now. But I just want to fill in some other gaps because I want to try and cover things kind of chronologically. So we will definitely come back to that. So please remind me in about 10 minutes. But I just want to highlight, so, okay, maybe we won't call it a mass walkout or lots of people being removed from their services. It's maybe another way to put it. I guess it's an issue of semantics, how you define things. But in some of those private conversations that as devotees have with me, they talked about issues of abuse at Karuna Bhavan. And, this, and just to clarify, that's not sexual abuse, by the way, but in terms of uh, the word bullying is used a lot in different contexts, but the word bullying has come up. Inappropriate use of funds, and again, a very broad term, but abuse of power. Those are some of the things some of the devotees have said to me. Now, I'm sure that the leadership of ISKCON Scotland are listening to this podcast, and the leadership of ISKCON UK. If you want to respond, I am more than happy to receive that response. I can publish a response from you on any of my social media channels. But unfortunately, Bhakti, I'm coming off the fence now. My experience is the same as yours. Nothing's ever put in writing. It's always done over the phone. And so I have a policy now. I've had this for a year. I do not talk to anyone in ISKCON leadership unless it's recorded or unless there's a witness present.
Yeah.
I had a very unpleasant conversation with the GBC of the UK 3 years ago, and I stupidly didn't record the conversation. I've learned my mistakes from that. But this is why it has to be recorded now. And one of the reasons I'm reluctant to have phone conversations with the leaders in ISKCON. Before we come on to now, there's just one other thing I want to talk about. I know a lot of this podcast is about you, but I want to talk about a particular legal case that we've been covering here at the Hare Krishna Project. It's the case of Mariana Consoni versus ISKCON Scotland. Now, I'm allowed to talk about this because it's in the public domain, and everything I'm about to say is in the public domain. I just want to clarify that before anyone attempts to write to me. Just give me a few minutes to explain this. So I received, and Mariana, if you're listening, I hope you're well. Mariana and I first had a conversation in the summer of 2022. So Mariana contacted me for advice and help. She had a story about things that were happening at Karuna Bhavan, and she wanted to share them with the media. So we had a number of conversations over that summer and throughout the year. And unfortunately, we were embargoed, which is a technical media term, which means we were not allowed to talk about a particular story until November 2023. So we covered it here at the Hare Krishna Project. And I'm just going to read out, so I don't get into trouble, I'm going to read word for word the statement I was allowed to publish in November last year and the statement from Mariana's solicitors. So hopefully you can still see me. I'm not going to share the screen, but I'm just going to read the statement. So we covered a story in November 2023 that ISKCON Scotland was being sued for sex discrimination, harassment, and victimization. And this is literally the statement. I'll read it out so I don't get into any more trouble. ISKCON Scotland is being sued for sex discrimination, harassment, and victimization in a high-profile case that will be heard next year, so this year, in a trial that is expected to last 2 weeks. So Mariana Consoni, who is a former member of Karuna Bhavan, which is the ISKCON farm community, first approached the Hare Krishna Project in 2022. The court case, which is expected to attract a lot of national media attention, and it has already appeared in the national media in Scotland, could set a precedent for the way workers and devotees and all religious organizations are treated. So here is a statement we've received this morning. This is me writing this in November from Miss Consoni's legal team at Livingston Brown in Glasgow. So this is a statement from her lawyers. Our client was a spiritual follower of this organization who moved from Spain to take up an unpaid role in Scotland with them and live and work on their eco-farm, which we know that Bhakti now set up or helped set up. She was then treated appallingly because she disclosed that she and the head monk had developed feelings for each other, which she did not believe were wrong. I'm not going to say his name for obvious reasons. She was then intimidated and harassed until she forcibly had to leave. By contrast, the monk was allowed to remain. This is the definition of discrimination due to her sex and caused our client a great deal of distress. The organization's lawyers, so ISKCON's lawyers, that is, the organization's lawyers, have then attempted a very technical defense of saying that she had no rights under the Equality Act, trying to argue that she was a volunteer and not a worker. The Employment Tribunal of Scotland has dismissed this evidence, and our client, Mariana, now looks to leading evidence from a number of witnesses about her treatment this year in court. And then finally, as well as the distress caused, the actions of this organization, i.e. ISKCON, has also destroyed any belief our client had that they were an organization based on spiritual values such as equality or fairness. What a statement. Now, just to say, I can't say too much about it, but I have seen some of that evidence. A piece of evidence was shared with me last year. It was an audio file. It was a recording. I need to be careful what I say. It was an audio recording of two people having a conversation, whereas one person was treating another person in a particular way. One of the people said to the other person, "Are you threatening me?" And this person in a position of leadership said, "Yes, I am threatening you." So I've heard that audio recording. I have a copy of it here. Obviously, I'm not allowed to broadcast that, but it will be used in evidence. Now, I just wanted to talk about Mariana's case because it's important to understand some of the things that have been going on at Karuna Bhavan. Of course, that's going to court. I believe it's going to court in June. I think it's going to court. It's been delayed for different reasons, but it's going to court in June, and it's been covered by the national media in Scotland. And Mariana was one of those devotees who left Karuna Bhavan because of different things going on. Okay, I just wanted to say that. Let's go back to Bhakti. So I want to pick up, before we get on to what's happening now, I want to pick up on this issue of, so the expression in layman's terms is the blind leading the blind, or it's kind of the police investigating the police. One of the things I think that ISKCON could do better at is being transparent about who is making these decisions and what authority do they have. So I've tried to do some preparation for this podcast, but it's very difficult to find things in writing because things aren't in writing. So I know who the trustees of ISKCON UK are because ISKCON UK is a charity on the Charity Commission website, and it tells me who the trustees are. So one of them, for example, is Kamalesh Krishna, who that's a fact. It says he is a trustee, and I believe, because someone else has told me, he's also the acting GBC of the UK. Have you heard that, Bhakti?
Yeah, I've heard that, yeah.
But it's not in writing. Now, I've also been told, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think it's in writing.
And I've also been told, but there's nothing online, that he's also now involved with ISKCON Scotland.
Yeah, he is, yeah.
Do you know what capacity?
Yeah, he's a trustee. Him, Titekshu, and Tarkanath have become trustees of ISKCON Scotland.
So, okay, so Tarkanath and Titekshu are also trustees of ISKCON UK. So then you're now saying that they're trustees with ISKCON UK and ISKCON Scotland?
Yes.
That's a recent change, is it?
Yes.
Okay. And also, again, Kamalesh Krishna Prabhu, you can contact me if I'm wrong. At the moment, you don't respond to my emails, but you can contact me if I'm wrong. I believe you've also been involved with ISKCON Resolve, which is the body, which is kind of independent from ISKCON, that investigates ISKCON. But I believe that you're also on it. So when you hear these same names keep cropping up, it's kind of like, how can you have a fair process here when this people are investigating themselves or their friends? Do you? I mean, and I think, do you have any comment to say on that at all?
Oh yeah, I mean, Pragosh, he was yeah, trustee as well, as far as I know, or as trustee. Titekshu, you know, admits he's a friend of Prana. And, you know, Pragosh is like you know, Prana's main, you know, Pragosh has been defending him throughout, you know. Yeah, it was a case of Prana made good relations with these people, you know, and so that they would act in his favor. So yeah, there's a certain amount of unfairness there, although as far as I can gather now, I mean, things have improved over the last couple of years. I have to say that. Prabhupada Prana has improved. I can say that. You know, his attitude has improved. And the trustees in the UK National Council, I mean, they can't actually, you know, they can't deny abuse of power under Prabhupada Prana's, you know, temple presidency. They've had too many you know, too many people have put forward complaints, or you know, it's obvious there was, you know, like serious abuse of power during his reign, although it has improved. And you know, I can talk to Ditaksha, I can talk to Kamalesh Krishna, I've talked to Pragosh on a few occasions. I mean, they're not kind of averse to me in any way. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say any of them have got anything against me, you know, any of the UK trustees. They seem to be quite friendly with me and happy to see me. And, you know, I'm happy to see them too. I think a big problem with Scotland is that people from outside Scotland get a certain impression, and, you know, I think that impression is changing over the last couple of years because people are speaking out now. Because, you know, say in 2015, if you spoke out, it was like you were out, basically, you know. And who could you speak to anyway? If you spoke to Pragosh, it was just like, you know, you maybe not get very far, you know. So things are improving. I think, you know, it's like, it's, you know, it's good people outside Scotland know what's going on in Scotland right now, and they've known for a couple of years now, you know, because Scotland's a bit out of the way and not many people come here. So someone can just take over the temple and just basically do what they like, and nobody else in us. And I mean, probably like, you know, Pragosh and Titakshu and Kamlesh Krishna, their impression of ISKCON Scotland would have been from Prabhupada Prana over the last 10 years, you know. They would have, none of them were coming here often. And I've seen Tarkanath here once, I think, you know. Pragosh used to come. When Pragosh was GBC, he'd be here maybe one weekend out of 2 years, you know. So their impression definitely was from Prabhupada Prana. So I think it's good that ISKCON UK management and devotees around the world are keeping in touch with what's going on here and what's been going on over the last couple of years. And they are going to keep in touch, and they are going to, I mean, I wish everyone well. I do love the devotees, you know. Prabhupada Prana didn't treat me properly at all, you know. I've forgiven him for it. I have forgiven him in my heart, you know. I'm not like determined he should be removed and, you know, he should suffer or anything. You know, I hope he does well. But, you know, I will keep my distance from him, you know, and you know, the trustees, I'm just getting to know and building relationships with them. So things seem to be improving like immensely, sort of thing, you know.
We just add a little bit more detail, because I know certain people will be listening to this podcast, a bit more detail to what's happening now. So ISKCON UK, did they carry out an investigation into Karuna Bhavan?
Yeah, over the last year, yeah.
And what were the results of that investigation?
Well, the conclusions were a few devotees get removed as trustees. Balab Badra was put on a trial. There'll be a proper complaints department. Bans that are in place will be reviewed, and there will be more members on the temple council, and there'll be a vice president. So, I mean, pretty good. But my thing is, you know, of course, my most important thing is my ban, you know, and that was bottom of the list. That will be dealt with after the new trustees are elected and put in place. After like there'll be 3 more temple council members, then my ban will be reviewed. It's like devotees come last, you know. Devotees come last out of all devotees. Devotees' personal situations are dealt with last rather than first. I mean, I was expecting something more. Although a lot of people were telling me don't expect too much, you know. So I was expecting a lot more. I mean, it's like, well, why should people in London care about me? What is it to them? My ban is like, okay, it was devastating for me at the time, but to somebody in London, what does it matter to them, you know? And the management of the UK, oh, as long as there's a temple there, as long as there's people, you know, and management, you know, we'll deal with the unfair treatment of devotees, you know, at the end, you know, after we've dealt with management positions, you know, then we'll deal with devotees being treated unfairly. It should be the opposite, you know. The devotees, you know, unfair treatment of devotees should be dealt with first. It just looks like ISKCON is, you know, very kind of like basically neophyte, you know, to you know, positions of management will be put in place first, and you know, it's like as if, you know, that's what you know you should join ISKCON for, to become a manager, to become a GBC, to become a temple president, more or less material desires, you know. It's like if you've got a position, you're advanced, and that's what's important. And you know, looking at it, it does look very neophyte, you know. It's like our devotees have been treated very unfairly. That comes last. That comes last. And the ones that treated them unfairly, they'll be doing the reviewing too. You know, it's just like, I mean, Readananda Swami says, has ISKCON got its own mental problems? I would say yes, because the way the conclusions and the way they're dealing with it, it just looks like it does not make sense. It's not caring, loving. It's just, you know, materialistic, and it just, you know, it doesn't even make sense. It's like, you know, those who put the unfair bans in place, some of those people will be reviewing their own unfair treatment of others. It's like, great, you know, thanks a lot. You know, that's very kind of you to, you know, you know, I try and like, you know, be nice to devotees and loving and caring, but I have got to say that, you know, it's like,
so just to say, Bhakti, so I have seen a copy of the report or the recommendations. It's been leaked to me by a number of sources. There's ways of getting stuff, you know. I have a copy of those recommendations. As far as I'm aware, this is not a private document. I mean, you know what document I'm talking about. Is it a private document?
yeah, it's public. Yeah, they can read it now.
It's public. So if anybody wants a copy of it, they can email me at the Hare Krishna Project, info@harekrishnaproject.org. I'd be happy to send you a copy. So these are the recommendations that have been put in place by ISKCON UK, the national charity that oversees ISKCON in the UK, and how Karuna Bhavan should be managed and what changes need to be put in place. These were agreed by the directors of ISKCON UK in January of this year. It's now April, so 3 months down the road, a quarter of a year. So I don't fully know whether all of these actions have been implemented or these recommendations. But I'm happy to send a copy of this to anybody who wants to read it. And also just to say, because we have been recording for quite a long time now, if ISKCON UK or ISKCON Scotland want to issue a statement in response to this podcast, I'm more than happy to publish that. If Kamalash Krishna Prabhu, who I believe is the acting GBC of the UK, again, that's not been confirmed. If he wants to appear as a guest on this podcast, I'd be delighted to welcome him. So an open invitation I'm making here for Kamalash Krishna Prabhu to appear on this podcast, to respond to any of the comments made in this recording or anything else that we've reported on here at the Hare Krishna Project. As you know, we report on a lot of stuff. Okay, I'm not going to go through the list. Okay, Bhakti. Is there anything else that you want to kind of say or conclude on before we kind of wrap up and say goodbye to the viewers at home?
Yeah, well, it looks like things are working out. Things are improving in like Karuna Bhavan in Scotland, and let's hope they continue to improve. But I mean, to be honest, it's been very, very, very slow. Devotee, I didn't realize the UK management, was kind of part time. It was like they all have their jobs, their service, and sort of managerial issues are sort of not on the top of the agenda. And I mean, I'll be honest and say, ISKCON, yeah, it's like, I mean, more love and devotion and more like Krishna. Never mind, we'll sort out the management situations first. And those devotees who have been waiting, being told to be patient for a year, we'll deal with them, in another 6 months or something, and it's like, well, what I asked to text you as well. What if the review committee decide that my ban was unfair? So I've waited 4.5 years, and then what if they agree that it was unfair, which it was, and I won't back down from that. But what's the situation then if my ban is if the review, whoever's reviewing it? But I mean, it's kind of like PR Pranas and a few of his friends who put the ban into place will be reviewing it. So it's highly unlikely they're going to. Well, I don't know, but I mean, they might admit they made a mistake. They might admit, okay, it was unfair, I shouldn't have done that. Because Kamalash Krishna has already said, devotees shouldn't be going around telling other devotees that they need therapy and all the rest of it, It's not for MD to say that about MD, You can politely suggest it to some close friends, maybe. But, you don't tell somebody, especially if you don't know them that well, or you need therapy, Okay, it's like, so, more like anti-Krishna consciousness, more, I've been concentrating a lot on my chanting and reading and getting more into the deeper side of things. And, it's like management seems to be quite materialistic. And, once you're in a management place and made friends with the right people, it's like, very difficult to complain about that person or have that person removed, or, it's like you have to wait years and years and years, and then it still might not come out fairly for you, So, Krishna consciousness isn't just 16 rounds, 4 regulative principles and what position of authority, and we're supposed to be acting like, proper human beings and souls, and being fair and treating people properly, and even if it's our friend, we still have to put that aside and treat others properly. And it's like that. Yeah, I'm disappointed. I mean, I love the devotees, but I have to admit, my presentation to the review committee was maybe not very good either. It was maybe a bit spaced out, and you know, I've got my faults and weaknesses too. So you know, I can understand. But I think in general, we do need to improve in ISKCON, you know, and start treating each other properly and putting devotees first rather than positions and property, and you know, you know, I'm not really, you know, I don't want to join a a big house that's got, you know, massive big bank account and loads of followers. If devotees, you know, don't love each other and treat each other properly, you know, I don't care how big the house is, how many people there, what size the bank account is. I'm not going if the devotees don't, you know, like, you know, love each other and treat each other properly, and that is the problem. That should be the main thing, you know. Yeah, because you know, over the last few years, yeah, I sometimes wonder. I mean, I could have went back to the temple a few years ago, but I decided to approach the ombuds and get the national council involved, because I thought I'm not going back if it's just going to be the same way as it was between 210 and 219. I mean, I'm not going back. I'm not interested in that. If that's Krishna consciousness, no thanks. So, what I've been doing over the last few years is like, you know, okay, you know, I want to come back, but I want to come back when things are in place and things are proper, and like we can actually get somewhere, we can get somewhere spreading Krishna consciousness. Because if things aren't proper at the temple, then there's very little success. As soon as you get a bit of success, somebody throws a spanner in the works, somebody, you know, wants to do something different, the management want to take over, all the rest of it. It's just impossible to try and get anywhere as soon as you get a bit of success. So this time when I come back, it's all going to be sorted out before I go back, so that the management know where I'm at and I know where the management are at, and we can work together. I want to see devotees working together, not like people removed and booted out and all the rest of it. I want to see us all working together, and that's what we'll work.
Oh, back to you. I think you've just paused yourself. There you go. Maybe that was a sign.
Yeah, it is.
But
Yeah,
no. It was a very, what you kind of finished then on was a really good positive note about people working together, and I'm passionate
sure.
about that as well. So, I think what we're going to do, Bhakti, we're going to wrap up. I'm going to say goodbye to the viewers at home, but stay on the line. It's like a TV show, isn't it? Stay on the line, because we'll have a brief chat after I've said goodbye to the viewers at home, because then we can talk about the stuff that we can't talk about on the podcast. Oh no, what are they saying? A big thank you to Bhakti for being the guest on this week's podcast, guest number 119. It's been great to catch up with him, to hear his story. Great to welcome him back after 2 years. And just to repeat, if any leaders of ISKCON Scotland or ISKCON UK want to appear on the podcast to respond, they are more than welcome to do so. And I will make sure, because we're currently still the #1 Hare Krishna podcast in the world, I will make sure that their story or their side of the story is shared. Do not forget, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you haven't already, to hit the subscribe button. That way you can be kept updated about future podcasts from the Hare Krishna project. Or if you're watching it on Facebook, which is the other way you can watch this podcast, to like or follow the Hare Krishna Project Facebook page. And also, please send feedback. I always get feedback, but please make sure your feedback is constructive. If it's something that you need help with and you think that I can help, or you want something done, get in touch. We're kind of getting through. We've got through the backlog, actually, if I'm honest. We've had a backlog of guests. Horrible expression, backlog. We've had a queue, and we're kind of through them now. And we have some more guests coming up soon. So anyway, I'm going to stop rabbiting on. Until next week, I'll see you all soon. Thank you. Hare Krishna.